Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it. I'm sure most of you are familiar with what happened in Bell. Now there are 8 people have been charged with a variety of crimes. And I had a short little story in today's paper that now the Fair Political Practices Commission is investigating a couple council members for accepting some gifts that they're saying may have exceeded the limit. All of them are out on bail. No trial date has been set yet, but I think there's a good chance that'll all happen sometime in the fall. So I'm going to tell you how we found out about this, how this all came about. I'm taking my watch off so I know when the time will be right to stop. This started in pretty much in the summer of 2010, a little bit before. And what happened was the city of Maywood, now these cities that we're talking about, Bell, Maywood, they are about 12 miles southeast of downtown LA. You just go straight down the 710, right along the LA River, and you run into these cities. They pretty much have the same demographic, 90% Latino, 50% foreign-born, which means a lot of these people are illegal immigrants. So what Maywood decided, because this city council had screwed things up so badly, they decided to lay off almost all of their employees. Their policing was going to be done by the LA County Sheriff's Department, and they signed a deal with their next door neighbor, Bell, that Bell would do their city services. So Ruben Vives was covering that area. I got called in on it. We wrote a story on that. You know, it's a pretty big deal. A city gets rid of all of its employees. So we write that story. And we're hearing that there are investigations going on in Maywood. So I then call the DA, what's called the Public Integrity Division, which looks at political officials. And I talk to the head of the division. I say, so are you guys investigating Maywood? And he says, no, because other people are investigating. And we took that to mean the FBI, although we were never able to confirm that, and the feds move very, very slowly, so that still could be going on. And so then, and I'm not sure why I asked him this, I said, what about Bell? And he says, as a matter of fact, we're investigating the Bell City Council for the high salaries they're getting. And I say, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he says, well, we think they're getting paid. Now, this is a part-time job. He says, we think they're getting paid $100,000 a year. Now, legally, they're supposed to get, according to state law, $4,000 to $6,000 a year. So my first reaction was, well, I'm going to quit my job and run for city council in Bell. So he sends me some documents. We write a story about that, which does not run on the front page, which irritates me to this day. But the fact that these people were getting so much money reminded me of a story I had done many years ago when I worked at the San Jose Mercury News. And that story was about the East Palo Alto Sanitary District, which deals with the sewers. Now, East Palo Alto is a very different city from Palo Alto. It's one of the poor, Palo Alto, Steve Jobs had a house there, middle of Silicon Valley, very wealthy place. East Palo Alto is one of the poorest cities in the Bay Area. It's literally across the railroad tracks from Palo Alto. So the sanitary district had built the nicest building in town, just a real Taj Mahal. And the story I wrote talked about that, and also talked how staff members and the elected board members were traveling around the country, spending money on fancy restaurants, fancy meals, and lots of other things which they really shouldn't have, had nothing to do with running a sanitary district. And a couple people were charged by the DA after my story came out. Similar dynamics, I thought. Poor city, minority city. I figure if these council members are getting $100 grand a year, they got to be ripping the city off for expenses in other ways. So Ruben and I, the next day, we walk into the Bell City Hall. We asked to speak to the city manager, who neither of us had talked to, this guy named Bob Rizzo. He wouldn't come talk to us, which was odd, because it's not very often 2 reporters from the LA Times show up in Bell. So the city clerk comes out. I tell her we want to see minutes of meetings, want to see employment contracts, want to see expenses. And she pulls out a piece of paper and says, okay, fill this out. So I figure it's just some bureaucratic thing. And so I fill it out. And then she says, okay, we'll give it to you in 10 days. Now, legally, they're entitled to do that according to the Public Records Act. What you should have done is turned around, handed me some documents and said, go knock yourself out. I mean, this stuff is sitting there. So I said to her, fine, if we don't get it in 10 days, we're going to sue you. And then I said, let me have a copy of this document I filled out. And she gives me a copy and charges me $1. So through this 10-day period, every day I'm calling the city clerk. And she's getting irritated, and I'm not getting a hold of her every day. And I'm saying, are the documents ready? And she's saying, no. I told you 10 days. And I'm telling her, if we don't get them, we're going to sue. And when we win, because we will, we're going to ask the judge to force you guys to pay our legal bills, which is part of the law. And at the same time, I'm talking to people in Bell who had emailed me after that first story appeared. And I'm talking to some of these people, getting a sense there's something wrong in Bell. No one can put their arms around it, but there's something wrong. So on what we're hearing this guy Rizzo makes a lot of money. How much? 300 grand, 400 grand, which is a lot for a city manager. It's not so out of the ballpark. Day 9, I get a phone call from the city clerk. She says, we're going to give you the documents tomorrow, and Mr. Rizzo would like to meet you. I say, great. Where? Assuming City Hall. She says, Little Bear Park. And I go, fine, and I literally have visions we're going to meet this guy on a park bench. I mean, Little Bear Park is the kind of place I would bring my 4-year-old to play. So now Ruben and I didn't talk about this for several months later, but both of us were a little bit worried we were getting set up somehow. Because, meeting in a park. We went separately. I told my wife where I was going to be, which is not something I usually do. I told my editor. And Ruben, when he drove up, he's sitting in his car, and he pulls out his notebook, and he knows that a white van is going to pull up and pull him out of his car and take him off. And so he is writing down the license plates of all the cars in the parking lot. And he stuffs it next to his seat because he knows that when they find his car, they'll find these license plate numbers. So in fact, we met them in a conference room at the park, which is probably the size like this. And Rizzo brought with him 10 people, including 2 lawyers, the police chief, a couple city council members, a city council member from Maywood, a bunch of city staffers, obviously trying to intimidate us, which is pretty funny. What are they going to do, beat us up? So we're sort of around this long table, and Ruben and I are sitting in the front. Documents are here. Somehow they expected us to look at these documents and ask them questions. We're going to get them anyway. What do I need to look at them there? So we start asking questions. And I'm, just trying to get a sense of what's going on. And then finally I look over at Rizzo and I say, how much do you make? Remember, his contract's over here, although we haven't looked at it. He says, $700,000. Which was such a high figure, I wasn't sure I was hearing right. I thought maybe he said $7,000 a month. I say, how much? And he says, $700,000. And Ruben goes, Jesus Christ. And I say, that must be the highest of any city manager in LA County. And Rizzo says, I'm sure it is. If that's a number people choke on, maybe I'm in the wrong business. I could go into private business and make that money. The council has compensated me for the job I've done. And the council members just jump to his defense, and everyone there jumps to his defense. We have good parks. The city was almost broke when he came in 17 years ago, and goes on and on. Then I turned to the police chief, Randy Adams, and he had been the police chief of Glendale, a much, much bigger city, had retired and a week later taken the job in Bell. So I ask him, how much do you make? And he says, $457. I say, how much did you make in Glendale? He says, $220. And I turn to this assistant city manager, Angela Spacci, and I say, how much do you make? And she says, I don't know.
Okay.
Everyone knows what they make, but she said she didn't know, and we're pushing her. What do you mean you don't know? And she starts tap dancing, and finally Rizzo says, oh, she makes about $350 a year. So this meeting went on for 4 hours. You know, the tension rising and dropping. One of the things I asked these city councilmen who are making $100,000 a year, I said, so do you guys make this much money in your regular lives? And Oscar Hernandez, who's the mayor and owns a little bodega next to the park, he smiles and says, I do, which we don't think that's true. And then Luis Artiga, someone who's a pastor there, he says he didn't, and he said he didn't know how much money he was going to make when he was appointed to the council, because in Bell, people are appointed and then they run. And so I said, well, what did you think when you got that first paycheck? And he said, I thought it was a gift from God. And so, like I said, this meeting went on for 4 hours. One of the things, we'd heard rumors that this one guy, Victor Bayo, had been a council member who'd resigned and was still getting paid his salary. Can't be true. Asked the question, it turns out Victor Bayo had resigned, was given a job, became the only paid employee of the city food bank, was working 4 hours a month, getting paid nearly $100,000 a year. Oh. So when the meeting ends, Ruben and I are left alone in this room with this an attorney for the city, a guy named Tom Brown. And, he says, yeah, I told them they had to give you the documents, that they would take a hit when this came out, but things would blow over. So later on, afterwards, this was on a Friday. So then I start looking at the documents, and I look at Rizzo's contract. And it's clearly written in a way to make it difficult to figure out how much he makes. You sort of have to do some math. He was getting a 12% raise each July. And for example, it mentioned he gets paid this much each pay period. It didn't say what a pay period was. But when I added up what he made, remember he told us $700,000, I came out with $787,637, which is, you know, a little more than 10% over that. And so I call Ruben, figures it out, and he comes out with the same figure I do. So I called Rizzo, last conversation I've had with him. And I said, Bob, you said you make $700,000 a year. I come out with $787 and change. Tell me where I'm wrong. And he says, I think you're high, but that's okay. So I tell Ruben, tell you what, we'll write the story, we'll use the figure we come up with, and I'm willing to write the correction that says Bob Rizzo doesn't make $787, he only makes $750. And it turned out we were wrong. He actually makes $1.5 million. And the way he made that is he got 26 weeks vacation and sick leave, not accumulated, every year. Every year, 26 weeks vacation and sick leave, which he would cash in, on top of all the other things that the city was paying for him. So his compensation annually was $1.5 million. What we also know is that a couple hours before our meeting with him, he called in the two city council members, Artiga and Oscar Hernandez, into his office, and he said, oh, you know the $300,000 I told you I was making? I'm really making $700,000. We also know that he went to great efforts to hide how much money he was making. There was a paramedic in town, a guy named Roger Ramirez. In 2008, he stood up at a council meeting, and You know, this is public record how much people make. Anyone can walk in and get that kind of information. And he stood up, Roger Ramirez stood up at the council meeting and said, listen, I want to know how much Bob Rizzo makes and how much the council members make. And I hear you make, you know, 400 grand a year. And Rizzo smiled and said, no. And why don't you come to City Hall and file a Public Records Act? Which immediately is a red flag, because all Rizzo should have said, here's how much I make. So Ramirez got a document which said that Rizzo made $185,736 a year. And city council members made $8,000 a year. Rizzo's been charged for that, for a false document. A few years earlier, an LA Times reporter had gone in and received a document that showed that Rizzo was making $221,000 a year and council members $25,000 a year. So, like I say, he'd gone to great lengths to keep this stuff private. What we also know now is what Rizzo did was fill out his contract and submit it, just put it through the city, never having it approved by the city council. Now that shows two things. A, his arrogance to do that, blatantly breaking the law. What it also shows is the city council just utterly not paying attention. I mean, it didn't ever occur to these guys, wait a minute, we need to approve this guy's salary. How come we never have? And no one asking, no one seemed to be concerned. I mean, what you had in Bell was an utter breakdown of all the checks and balances. City council either wasn't paying attention or was in on it. You had auditors. Every year a city has to be audited by independent auditors. The auditors found nothing, and they were excoriated ultimately by the State Controller's Office, which did an audit of the auditors. I mean, if guys like Ruben and I can find out how much, can figure out all this stuff, where were the auditors? So, I mean, the FPPC just coming in, I mean, where were they all these years? I mean, you have to ask these questions. Where was everyone else? So the meeting was on a Friday. The story came out, it hit our website late Wednesday, hit the newspaper the next Thursday. This is now July 15th of 2010. And all hell broke loose. I've never encountered anything like this, with our Blackberries just filled with emails saying a variety of things, from way to go to giving us tips to come visit our city and check out. I'm talking like Denver, Long Island, New Jersey. It was really an amazing thing. The next Monday, there was a regularly scheduled council meeting. And so I'm in our office, and Ruben's covering the meeting. It started at 6 o'clock. And then he calls the office and says, there are like hundreds of people here. Jeff needs to come down here. Now, Bell's City Council chamber seats 92 people. So I get down there, and not only is the council chambers full, outside on the lawn, hundreds of people carrying signs and chanting in English and Spanish. I mean, one of the signs said something like, our city council members are stealing from us, but we have good parks. And so by this time, Ruben and I had done a video on our website, and I was carrying a reporter's notebook, which is about half the size of this. So as I'm trying to walk through, people sort of noticed me, and literally the crowd just, you know, split. It was like the crowd parted. And so I walked through, and people are clapping me on the back and asking for my autograph and cheering. It was, you know, trust me, that doesn't usually happen to reporters. It was really a wonderful experience to see that happen. It's sort of overwhelming, and we've had experiences like that throughout this time we have been writing about Bell. And this one, I mean, this was all I did for more than a year, did nothing more than Bell. And we've continued to report on Bell, continued to write on other cities. And I can go on and on about this, but we don't have that much time, so let me take questions if anyone has any.
Where did they get their money? as a city?
Well, that's an interesting question, because when we had our powwow with the city officials, they were telling us what a great city was in great financial shape, and what a great job Rizzo had done. But what happened, because of all this, the high salaries that they were paying, and it wasn't only Rizzo and the other people I mentioned. The finance director was getting over 400 grand. There were other city officials making huge amounts of money. I mean, way over the top. But Rizzo they had this voracious appetite for money. Voracious, they had to bring in. So Bell has the second highest property tax rate in the county. This is one of the poorest cities. Second highest property tax rate. They set up these. They would impound cars. So what they would do is set up these drunk driving stops, knowing that a lot of people they were going to stop were illegals who didn't have licenses, and they would then impound their cars and charge them outrageous fees to get their cars back. They were also going after people for code violations. I mean, like a guy selling oranges on the street, popping him for code violations, someone washing his car on his lawn, that kind of stuff. But I mean, and Bell is when you look at the books, Bell is in really bad shape. I mean, if they manage to avert bankruptcy, it'll be amazing.
Nobody said anything. The citizens didn't say anything. They just, how long did this happen?
Well, that was something that happened too. I mean, the citizens, first of all, the city government was pushing people away, trying to keep people out. And this is a poor city. People are working hard. So there were very few people, I'm talking 5 people show up at city council meetings. But the city government was doing everything it could to keep people from getting involved too. Yes?
Do you have any idea how long this was going on before you found out about it?
We're often asked that. And first the question is, what is this? The bad stuff.
Well, I met George Cole. I used to be on the LA City Council. I met George Cole, one of the defendants.
One of the defendants?
In the late 80s.
Okay.
And he had already been on the council for a while.
Right.
And I could not figure out why anybody wanted to be on the city council in Bell, which is so small that you couldn't have much impact on the world. Now I know.
Right.
But so what I was wondering is, was that going on all the time that he was on the council?
Well, number one, George Cole was a real power broker in southeast LA County. I mean, went beyond Bell. We know, I'm trying to think how far back we can go. I know, in 2005 there was hinky stuff going on when they decided to become a charter city, where they had an election where fewer than 400 people voted, and they held the election on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. No one's going to vote. It was the only thing on the ballot. Like I said, I'm trying to think of how far we can go back. I think you can go back. No. Rizzo, because Rizzo was there 17 years. Rizzo came in 93, I think it was. So that's a long time. Yeah, Cole was involved in hiring him. There was also a guy on the city council in there, Pete Werline, who was, has organized crime ties, who has been busted for, different things, and, done prison time, was on the council, and it goes back a ways. Okay.
Wondering if there's something that you could say about, did Bell have a redevelopment agency? Was that another channel for money? And 2, what about things like nonprofit bingo and things like that in Cole's record?
Do you know Cole? Because you.
Yes, I know from the 90s.
Okay. There was a redevelopment agency. There were some problems with the redevelopment agency. After we did a lot of our stuff and the state controller came in and audited, they found lots of problems in the redevelopment agency. I mean, I can't recall exactly what it was, but we've written about it, what they found. There were problems. If you want, I can,
I do.
I can let. Oh no, okay. I can let you know easily. In terms of nonprofits, George Cole, who's a former steel worker, had a, and still does, has a foundation called the Old Timers Steelworkers Foundation, which did a lot of things in Southeast LA County, including ride share stuff. He also, one of the things that Rizzo did is he gave loans of city money, which wasn't approved by the city council, to about 44 members, city workers, as much as $300,000. Also, I forget how much, but like around 40 grand to the Old Timers Foundation. Also gave $300,000 loan to a car dealer. So, you know, we have done some looking at coal, probably not as much as we should. But, you know, like I said, you know, coal is the real power was one of the real power brokers there. Although coal was not on the council by the time we stuck our heads in. Yes?
It seems like, I mean, you're talking about large sums of money, you know, being distributed. What was happening on the banking side? Who was monitoring the actual transfer of the funds?
Well, you got the finance director, Lourdes Garcia, who's been given immunity by the partial immunity by the DA, who was making over 400 grand a year, and you know, when the new regime came in after Rizzo was given the boot, her salary was busted down to under 200 grand a year. I forget exactly how much it is, but you know, internally, I think your question ultimately leads to internally. People knew what was going on. There were people who knew what was going on. They had to. It is impossible not to. And no one said anything.
So it was a ring of people with Rizzo at the top, the financial director, possibly.
Well, she has me charged, but I mean, there were people who had to know stuff was. It's just impossible. I mean, you know, I interviewed Angela Spaccia once, and she said, you know, I said, you had to know that Rizzo was making, that this money was outrageous. And she said, no, she said to me, no, I didn't. All I knew was that, you know, what the city manager of Vernon, city next door, was making, which, I mean, that's a whole other story, was making all kinds of money. So, I mean, people had to know. Yes?
Other than the rendezvous in the park, did you ever feel afraid?
No. No. You know, once our stories came out, I mean, I used to joke, I could probably, you know, Bell is not the greatest area. We met some wonderful people there. I could make a U-turn on a red light while I was drunk, and nothing would happen to me. So, but we never felt worried. I'll tell you a story. One time, Ruben and I are sitting in a Mexican restaurant in Bell, and we get up to leave, and all of a sudden, this big Latino guy kind of barks out, "Where are you guys from?" And I'm like, oh, you know, let's say I can speak Spanish, but I don't look like people in Bell. And so I'm like, oh, great. And so I say, LA Times. And he comes over and he says, I just want to shake your hands. You guys have done just great stuff. And then he gives us fist bumps, and it turns out he's the owner of the restaurant, and he says, anytime you're in town, you tell my mother you're from the LA Times and lunch is on me. You know, which we can't do, but it's just a wonderful thing, you know, to have happen. Yes?
Talking about the great sums of money that seem to be going out, have you been able to figure out, was there federal funding that was coming in for this that they were misappropriating or using for whatever, they give Homeland Security money, or did it go higher than?
Yeah, there was federal money, but coming in. But I mean, Rizzo. I mean, in terms of, do we think that what the feds were misappropriating? I mean, was there misappropriation of federal money? You know, like I say, I can't recall anything offhand. Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, it's like everywhere you look. We've joked, what haven't we found out? You know, we've written more than well over 100 stories on this, of finding, you know, all kinds of stuff. I mean, like I say, we joke, what haven't we found? Yes.
What's the responsibility of the auditors? Because in a corporate situation, the auditors are supposed to issue a letter on internal controls.
Right.
And this is obviously missing from
right.
this story.
Right. Well, we wrote a story about the job alleged job that the auditors did. I'm looking to see, I have written down in here what the state controller said about the auditors. If I could find this quickly. I can't find it, but in answer to your question, okay, the state controller said that they failed to comply with 13 of 17 fieldwork auditing standards in fiscal year 2809 audit. They focus on company year-to-year financial numbers rather than looking at inappropriate activities. I mean, when I talked to people for a story we wrote, you know, they told me that what auditors do is you find something wrong, you dig deeper. Then you find something else, you dig deeper. To me, all you have to do is look at Rizzo's contract and start looking. But they found nothing. I mean, zero. And I looked for that stuff. I've got all their reports. Nothing. So, yes.
So after all these, there was an election. New council members were elected, and then the council members elected the mayor. I wonder, A, how have they been doing to recover out of this? B, how much they are making?
The whole new council of amateurs, and by that I mean people who hadn't been involved in city government before. I think they're very serious about trying to do good. Most of them were they were all activists once everything broke out. I believe they're making somewhere, you know, $6,000 a year or something like that.
Per year.
Pardon?
Per year.
Per year, yeah. No, trust me, they knew that, like, if we were looking at it, I mean, legally, and according to the state charter and according to state law, there are limits on what they're supposed to be making. So it's, yeah, they got a tough job. They got a tough job. Yes?
Did you discover any collusion with the local school board? Was there?
No.
Nothing.
Nothing. Well, there is no local school board. It's LAUSD.
LAUSD.
LAUSD. Yeah. Nothing. No. Although George Cole had gotten involved in some school stuff. So, yes.
What happens to you and Ruben after the Nobel Prize, the
Pulitzer?
whatever.
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing that happened is the day after I had to take out the trash. So, literally. You know, Ruben, I'm, you know, continuing to investigate cities and various municipalities and do different stories. And Ruben has been, actually he's lately been covering Long Beach, but what he's been doing most recently, I don't know if you've seen stories on the county assessor, John Noguez. Ruben's been involved in that. I've written stories lately about El Segundo, some stuff about their relationship with Chevron. I've done some stuff on Cudahy. I've done a variety of stuff. I'm going to leave you with one thing. These were emails from the police, between the police chief, Randy Adams, and Angela Spaccia, the assistant city manager. They were negotiating Adams' contract. And Adams writes, "I'm looking forward to seeing you and taking all of Bell's money." And Angela Spaccia writes back, laugh out loud, "Well, you can take your share of the pie just like us. We'll all get fat together." Bob has an expression he likes to use on occasion. Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. So long as we aren't hogs, all is well.
Is the police chief being investigated too?
I actually wrote a story about because the question people ask is, why hasn't the police chief been charged? And in fact, the judge at a hearing said, I don't understand why the police chief, Randy Adams, hasn't been charged. They say they don't have enough to charge him. The DA says that. So, yeah.
Has American Greed, the TV show, been in touch with you about making an episode?
Is that the one on CNBC?
Yeah.
Is that Bill Curtis?
I
think they have. Well, there's one CNBC show which actually contacted me lately. Well, thank you very much.